In this video, we are going to do some more practice of how to simplify radicals or square roots when we have things that are not perfect squares. And we're going to do this with the factoring out the perfect square method, my preferred method. If you haven't already checked out the first video in this lesson on that, you're going to want to do that so that you see how and why what I'm about to do works. Because all I'm doing here is showing you the process. You're going to want to see why it works in that first video. Let's jump into it. So the square root of 18, remember we're looking for perfect squares that go into any of these. So my perfect squares are 1 squared is 1, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9. So these are all the perfect squares here. 4 squared is 16. Oh my goodness, let's keep going. 5 squared is 25, listing them all out. 6 squared is 36. So if you forget what they are, I would commit them to memory and generate them like I'm doing right here, just going from 1 to 10 we'll stop at, but they keep going. And squaring out all the numbers, that gives you perfect squares, or numbers that are results of squaring or multiplying a whole number by themselves. So now 18, what is the largest of all these numbers that goes in 18? 9. 9 is the largest number that goes in 18, so we can rewrite that as the square root of 9 times the square root of 2. That gives us back 18. Square root of 9 is 3 because square root of 9 asks what number when multiplied by itself gives me 9. That would be 3. 3 times the square root of 2. That's it. That's your answer. It's sweet. Awesome. Okay, now, negative square root of 60. Well, what is the largest perfect square that goes into 60? 4 goes into 60, 9 doesn't, 16 doesn't. And if you have trouble figuring out what numbers go into 60, use a calculator. Right? Just keep dividing by these numbers, and if you're getting decimals back, those numbers do not go into it evenly. 16 does not, 25, 36. Once you get past halfway, none of the numbers are going to go into it because past halfway, you can no longer double the number to get into it. So once you go past a number greater than 30, there's no point in checking them. And once you get past a number higher than it, it definitely doesn't go into it. So the highest number that goes into 60 is 4. That is a perfect square, that is. So I have negative square root of 4, that negative's from here, times 15. And again, you can use a calculator to see that 60 divided by 4 is 15. The square root of 4 is 2. We have negative 2 root 15. Beautiful. And remember, negative 2 root 15, 3 root 2, that means negative 2 times root 15, 3 times the square root of 2. All right, the square root of 200, the biggest perfect square that goes into 200, 4 goes into it, 25 goes into it, 100 though is the biggest. And the reason why we want the biggest is because that will quickly get us to our most simplified answer. And I'll go over what happens when we don't do the biggest in the last question on this lesson. So 100 goes into it, and that's a perfect square. So it's the square root of 100 times 2. The square root of 100, what number when squared gives us 100? 10. So it'd be 10 times the square root of 2. Nice. All right, keep going. Square root of 75, what's the biggest perfect square that goes into 75? 25. You get real quick at this, and after a very short while, you might even start doing these mentally. 25 times 3 is 75, so it's the square root of 25 times square root of 3. The number multiplied by itself that gives us 25 is 5 times the square root of 3. Beautiful. Now, in number 5, I'd like to show you what happens when we don't multiply by the biggest perfect square. So let's say that we just stop at 4 and say, well, I realize that 4 goes into 48 12 times. So the square root of 4 times the square root of 48. Ah, geez, that's not what it is. Square root of 4 times the square root of 12, right? Because 12 times 4 is 48. Now the square root of 4 is 2. So we have 2 root 12, but don't ever stop and assume that you're done. These were all done because the numbers that we had left were prime numbers, or numbers that also, even if they weren't prime, that 15 is not prime. But none of them had perfect square factors left in them, so we knew that we were simplest form. And that's important. When your square root has no more factors in it, so the number inside the square root has no more factors that are perfect squares, you know that you're in simplest radical form. This still has 4 that can go into it, which is a perfect square. So no sweat, all we do is keep the 2 and multiply by root 4 times root 3. So you're basically simplifying this down again. Root 4 is 2, so we get 2 times the square root of 3. 2 times 2 is 4, root 3. And since 3 has no perfect square factors that goes into it, 4 root 3 is our simplest radical form. Nice. On the flip side of this video, I've got just a few more practice problems, like 2 or 3 of them. that are going to start out with a multiplication. We'll see what that's all about. See you on the flip side. And here we are on the flip side of the video where we're just going to do just 3 more problems. The only difference between these and what we did in the first half of the video is there are numbers starting out being multiplied by the radicals. Basically, all you have to do is ignore the number for now, and you'll multiply it through by the simplified form of the radical. Let me show you what I mean. Well, I don't have my list of perfect squares anymore because I'm showing you eventually where you should get to mentally. For now, have your list of perfect squares like I had in the first half of the video. But we want the biggest perfect square that goes into 72. Now 4 does go into 72, and so does 9. But if you keep going down the list, and use your calculator if you need to, 36 is a perfect square and goes into 72 twice. So we would get -3 times the square root of 36 times the square root of 2. 2 times 36 is 72. The square root of 36 is 6, so I get -3 times 6 times the square root of 2. -3 times 6 is -18. Square root of 2. And that right there is your answer. Not bad. So when you have that number out front, you ignore it. You multiply it through when it's time, when you have a number that comes out. Not so bad. Okay, so this one here, again, ignore the 1/4. So we got 1/4 is hanging out. The largest perfect square that goes into 40 is 4, and it goes into it 10 times. So it's root 4 times the square root of 10. The square root of 4 is 2, so we'll get 1/4 times 2 times the square root of 10. Well, 2 times 1/4 simplifies, 2 goes into itself once, into 4 2 times. You're left with 1/2 times the square root of 10, or some people will write that as the square root of 10 over 2. Be careful, 10 does not divide by 2 because the 2 is not under that same power, that same radical, all right? So that doesn't become square root of 5. Very, very careful there. Nice. By the way, we know we're in simplest radical form here because 10 has factors of 2 and 5 and has no perfect squares that go into it evenly. All right, we'll turn around here. 5 root 20, similar to what we did in the last ones. That's 5 times the largest perfect square that goes into 20 is 4. So root 4 times root 5. The square root of 4 is 2. So you get 5 times 2 times the square root of 5. 5 times 2 is 10 times the square root of 5. Again, 5 does not have any perfect squares in it, so we know we're in simplest radical form. That's it. When you got a number to start out being multiplied, no sweat. Multiply it by whatever number comes out. See you in the next video.